Calvin T. Mann, leading EMIY, served over 20,000 youth through speaking, coaching, and mentoring. He has inspired us for years. Welcome to EMIY TV Podcast with your host, Calvin T. Mann, the Encourager.
Surprise, surprise. You were looking for the man and you found the Heather Heteru instead. Good day, good people. This is going to be a kind of different day today. I am in preparation for two amazing workshops taking place this week. The first one is Friday, July the 28th. And this particular workshop is called Peacefully Thriving. And co-facilitating this workshop is Lakita Simone, our own trauma and divorce survivor coach. She's going to be co-hosting this amazing workshop coming up Friday. If you haven't heard about the workshop or if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to take a look at what's happening. I kind of want to toss out some things today in our conversation to help people understand and be able to navigate the workshops you need to be attending, at least the two that are happening this week. So there's another workshop that I'm facilitating on Sunday, and that is called Peace and Grief. And so while both of these workshops are talking about how to survive our grief, they're also very different audiences that the workshop can also be for. So when you look at Peacefully Thriving, you're looking at grief in different aspects of your relationships. So that grief could be a loss of a family, friend, or loved one. It also could be the loss of an important relationship, a long-term relationship, or just a really heartfelt relationship. Because when we do break up with others, when we separate from marriages, when we have that type of split, we call that, in our work, we call that a spiritual tear. And because of that spiritual tear, there's a lot of, let's just call it cell damage that goes along with the separation of two people coming together to have a relationship. And whether that separation is from their passing or transition, the physical passing and transition, or whether that tear is from a decision from one or both parties to separate. The pain is still the pain, regardless of how you feel. And I'm not necessarily trying to compare the two, but I want to acknowledge that both of them cause grief and pain. And the third loss, of course, is when we lose someone that's very close to us, even in a lot of cases, our children. And so some of those deep hurts need support in nurturing back into a functioning, healthy individual. And I want people to understand that if we don't deal with our grief, let me give you some stats. I'm speaking right now to the women. Let me give you some stats. Why are women dying? The top 3 reasons for women dying in the United States. The first one is heart disease, which equates to just heartbreak, heartache, right? The second one is cancer. We talked about that spiritual tear and how it causes cellular damage. That spiritual tear, while there is a multi-level relationship that is being severed and broken, that spiritual tear can also build up and expose itself as a cancer. The third one is a stroke. And I'm talking about women. I'm talking about women, and I'm going to tell you the age range, which will really blow your mind. So the third one is stroke. And so that is lack of breath. That's lack of oxygen in your bloodstream. That's lack of oxygen to your brain. That's lack of oxygen. That's lack of taking a deep breath. That's lack of cleansing. It can be caused by many things, but I want you to look at this a little bit deeper. If we have all of this trauma, how is it being expressed in our lives? It's going back into our bodies because we never allow it to really leave. And if you're not part of the process of your own healing, what happens is we end up as statistics. Number 1, 2, and 3. And then beyond that, of course, we get into diabetes. We get into domestic violence. We get into all kinds of homicide because we're having all of these homicidal thoughts inside of us. And what we're doing with those homicidal thoughts is killing ourselves, sometimes slowly, but we think that we're just inflicting that pain upon ourselves. But everyone that is attached to us has to experience that pain because we either do it in the sharpness of our words, the kind or unkindness of our words and actions, our thoughts. When your body is in survival mode and your body is in crisis, you are not functioning. They call it executive functioning. You are not functioning at your highest state. That means you could mishear words or situations. You could misperceive things that you thought you saw or you thought you heard or you felt and didn't think about. I mean, all of these series of events start to happen in your life and you start wondering, why are these things happening? And then if part of that is the draw to it, we're drawing these things to us. And if we're not a part of this process, and this is really huge in terms of what's happening in our families. Now, if you imagine, I know this is a lot coming, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep flowing, right? So one of the things to understand, if these things are happening, these different physical dis-eases and discomforts are happening to women, right? And it's going unresolved, unhealed, unaddressed, right? As long as we're on that course, I'm going to break down some stats around marriage and divorce. And so, we think that it's separate. It's not separate. We think that these are isolated incidents. This is a series of, when we think of chaos, this is a series of chaos that tends to take place, not only in your body, not only in your outer relationships, but it takes place and keeps taking place. It's like one thing after the other. If you're feeling that way and it's one thing after the other, pain is a trigger. Pain points to something that needs to be resolved. Pain in of itself is not a bad thing. When it goes unaddressed, unresolved, pain then turns into discomfort and diseases and even death. And so we found that it can lead to death just by the stats of how women are dying. So we're dying. Heart disease is number 1, cancer is number 2, and stroke is number 3. And of course, followed by the other things that we mentioned that we know are happening in our lives. Part of that trauma and drama is coming from our unresolved issues. And part of those unresolved issues are part of the grief that we're experiencing. And so I'm going to give you just a tad bit of the marriage, how it's impacting our marriages and divorce rates. And I'm just going to look at women between the ages of 25 and 64. This is where the highest rates of divorce, this is where the highest rates of marriages are taking place. So the number of marriages has slowed down tremendously for women. Also, the number of divorces have increased for women. And so if there are so many increases in divorce, I want to also tell you what's increasing. The number of abortions have increased tremendously. And so just what's documented, and I'm just talking about the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan that's just documented is over 30,000 abortions a year. Now, compact that, let's just say that it's a different woman. And this is not about judgment, your choice on abortion or not, because there are some other things that we're going to talk about that are either your choice or not your choice, your life circumstance, right? But I'm specifically talking about abortions right now, because that's one of the ways that it's documented, right? And so, again, when it is documented, and this is according to our vital records for the state of Michigan, it's a minimum. Let me explain that. There's a minimum of 30,000 documented abortions a year. So look at the number of women who are impacted that are still dealing with that grief and trauma. Maybe they have had some help and support to move through it, but the vast majority of us have not had that. It plays out in divorce. It plays out in heart disease. It plays out in all of these areas. And so I want to kind of bring that back to why the Peacefully Thriving workshop is very important, and why, if you haven't made the choice to get some professional help and attention, or if you're in that state but you need some more support, this is a great space to connect to. This is a series that's going to happen over the next 3 months. And so Peacefully Thriving is about grief when there is a loss of relationship, sometimes a loss of life, also a loss in relationship in terms of breakup, divorce, separation. That type of loss, a loss of a best friend, those types of losses are what we're going to help people to be able to understand and set your plan on how you're going to navigate those waters from here forward. You can't address what happened in the past, but you can do something about what you feel right now. And so we want you to have this opportunity to have the tools that we're offering, to have the resources that we're offering, the intentions that we're offering you, and the possibilities for your life to be different, for your life to eliminate some of the things that are holding us in place, to eliminate some of those things that make us behave a certain way, to eliminate those things that seems like it's one trauma or drama after the other. We want to get you out of those cycles, because those cycles end only one way. There's one way. You can only carry a burden for so long. You can only carry the secret. You can only put the mask on for so long before everything starts to slip. And so we want to make sure that you have some tools and that you are supported in this journey. This is a major part of your life journey, is understanding more about yourself and healing in those spaces that need to be healed. Now, the workshop that's coming up on Sunday, the 30th, is called Peace in Grief. And this is specifically for women who have endured abortion, miscarriages, and stillbirths. And there's a particular type of woman that is taking this journey right now, needs that extra support, doesn't need the jargon. You don't need the judgment. This is not about judgment. This is about getting some tools to help you to overcome and help you to see some things in a different way. And so I got this insight around how this is described, right? The insight was that it was like being in a life cream. It's called a life cream sandwich. The life cream sandwich, we know how ice cream sandwiches are, right? There's a cookie bottom and there's a cookie top, and then the ice cream is in the middle of that, right? So that gooey, sticky substance is the things that we experience in our life. So that bottom cookie is your life circumstances, how you're born into the world, the family you're born into, the circumstances you're born into, the things that you have no control over. That sticky, ice creamy, gooey substance in the middle are choices, decisions. Some of it are a series of events that cause the decision to take place, or a series of events that put decisions and opportunities in that space. But all of that still is the fabric of who you are as a person. And we're not putting judgment on it. So we're not calling it good, bad, right, or wrong. We're just saying it's that sticky, gooey substance that makes up your life. Your work, your children, your style of dress, your attitude, all of that. All the relationships you choose to be in, and some of the ones you don't choose at all. But that gooey, sticky substance of the things that happen in our lives is that life cream in the middle. And at the top of it is where we are now and what we have to deal with. And so for me, that top layer is called strongholds. The things that hold us in the places that we are. Some of those strongholds need to be addressed because the basis or the foundation for them is corrupted. And it's also a space that we have not gone back to revisit. And for a lot of people, and myself included, I fall into this category, and I find myself walking through this process all the time as I'm doing my reflections, right? The things that come up in your childhood. And I know I talk about this quite a bit because I think it's funny. Funny, ha ha, and then funny, like ironic funny. So when I was a child, I was telling a group of women yesterday that my mother used to give us prayers and scriptures to read and to remember. And that would be your prayer at night, and it would be your prayer over your food. It would be your prayer. And so as a child, what you hear and what you think you hear may be very different from what you hear and you think as an adult. If you never go back to challenge those ideas and beliefs from your childhood that are a part of who you are, it can impact you throughout your life. And so for mine, and I'm sure a lot of you know this particular scripture, the scripture says, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And as I was a child, what I heard was, I will never leave the North for safety. I will never leave the North for safety. I never challenged that idea. It made sense to me. But what it did was it created an impression and a fear inside of my mind. So when I moved to different places in the country, I moved to Florida, I moved to Georgia, I moved to Tennessee, and I was always eager to come back to Michigan. And I had so many reasons that made sense to me at that time, but the underlying basis of my always leaving those spaces, beautiful spaces, I love those spaces, but I didn't feel safe. So anything could get me to move right back to Michigan. And so when I started to reflect and think about what were the things that I had that were happening in my life as a child that had been affecting my actions. Like, who wouldn't want to live in Florida outside of some of the obvious things, right? But being by the ocean and sandy beaches and palm trees and warm weather all year round, right? Outside of those beautiful things, it would have to be something really traumatic to uproot you. We know the snowbirds kind of travel back and forth, but the point that I'm making is that when I heard that, and it was something that I repeated, it was a mantra, because I used it as my prayer. I used it over the blessing on my food, and I repeated it over and over until I was an adult. I was an adult, and it didn't occur to me. I happened to be in Bible study in my younger years. I was probably around 33 at that time. And we're sitting and, in Bible study, and that scripture came up. And the first time I heard what they were saying, but I was like, wow, that sounds familiar. Sounds like the prayer. And so when I really read it, and I really heard it, it was like unlocking all of these different dimensions and layers of my years as a child up to adulthood, misunderstanding what I heard. But it became such a part of me, it determined where I would live. That's a huge part of my life, having to move from one place to another because I didn't feel safe and had been repeating all the way through my life that I would never leave the North. So then I would never be safe anywhere but North. And for me, North was Michigan. That was my home. And so I always would default and come back here, no matter what opportunities I had. But that was a major impact on my decision making. It was a major impact on relationships. All of that was affected by that one mantra that as a child I misunderstood. And so it's important for us to have reflection and insight. And then the other part of that is to actually listen. Because I could have missed that, and it could have continued in that mindset, not being safe anywhere else, right? I could have continued in that. But thank God there was an awakening, there was an insight that helped me to start to reflect more on that. And so this is kind of one of the tools that we use in affirmations. But these are some of the things that we're going to talk about at Peacefully Thriving, the one on Friday. And also some of those ideas also will show up on Sunday. So I wanted to repeat now, there are 2 workshops happening this month. That is Friday, July 28th. It's called Peacefully Thriving. And if you want to register for that event, you can go to lakitasimone.com at my co-facilitator for that event. I'm going to just give you a little bit of insight what that's about. Not only is it about the inner healing that we need as women, It's about finding your confidence again. So especially if you've gone through a divorce, or you've gone through a breakup and you were living together, now you have to start over and kind of rethink how your life is going to be shaped and how you're going to move forward in a different capacity that you were before. Maybe you were a we and now it's a me, right? Maybe we were raising children and now it's me raising children. Or maybe it was we that had a dream or a vision about this house, but I can't afford that anymore. So I have to make some tough decisions. Like all of these different opportunities for us to heal and us to grow and us to be able to navigate those difficult waters. When we try to do that by ourselves, the only wisdom and knowledge that we have is what we've had from our past. When you're looking for change, and I'm going to give you this another tip. When you're looking for change, you have to go through a process. And this is one of the processes that I suggest and I help people navigate as a personal change coach and also in my workshops. The first thing you need is new information. You need new information. Without new information, you only have what you've always had. And there's some wisdom and reflection and really digging deep into those things that you have. But for right now, for your process of change, and we're talking about whether your environment changed, whether it changed with or without your permission, change is upon us. So the first thing you need is new information. You need new answers to those old questions. You need new information. The second most important piece of this process is that this new information that you're getting, you have to be able to appreciate it. Because if you don't appreciate that information, you'll never apply it, which goes into the third step. You have to be able to apply the new information that you've learned and the appreciation from either somebody else's experience. That appreciation can come from the wisdom that you find in it. That appreciation can come from somebody else's journey and change because of it. You need new information. Then you have to appreciate either the source of the information. So the information I'm sharing with you comes from our vital statistics for the state of Michigan. And so that's my source. So if you don't value mine, value the source that it came from. So you have to be able to appreciate that and value what you've been given. The third step is to now apply it. Apply it to your life, not somebody else's circumstances, but your own. Because that's what they tell you on the plane, right? When you're on the plane and there's some turbulence and the mask drop down, they tell you, put your mask on first. Because you can't help somebody else if you're half conscious, if you're not getting enough oxygen to your bloodstream, right? We need for you to be conscious and awake. So you have to apply it to you first, right? So apply that to your life, your journey first, and then you share that with others to help them navigate their way. The fourth step is to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? Be transformed by the new information that you heard, the appreciation that you have for it, the application of it, and now you can transform and be transformed by that. So your transformation can come from healing from that breakup, healing from that divorce, healing from that circumstance, right? Part of transformation is change. So that change now, or accepting that this is a part of your life or a chapter in your life that's closed and you have another one coming, right? Being able to embrace that. And then the fifth step is to be able to elevate. That's almost like growing out of your old shoes, growing out of your old skin, growing out of your old bones. And I appreciate this lesson that I'm going to share with you. One of the most important pieces of the development of a child to an adult, it's like we always say, wow, they're growing up so fast, right? When you see somebody one moment, they may be 3 years old. Next time you see them, they're 16. Next time you see them, they're 26. Next time you see them, they're parents and they're married and they have grandkids. All of these things, you are watching these things happen. We get to see like the time-lapse video of growth when we see people outside of that. But everybody started off as a child. Everybody started off as an infant. And one of the reasons why babies cry and they sleep and they eat so much is because every day their body, their bones, their muscles, their skin, all of that is growing exponentially. It's exponential growth. And you look at them, so they come from this small 6 or 8 pound baby to 1 year later, at one, they're 40 pounds, they're 30 pounds. And then they get to 2 and 3, and now they're in preschool, and now they're in elementary school. All of that growth, this is the same thing that's happening to us. Now, at a certain age, it starts to slow down for us. And I'm told that age is around 26. So by 26, your eyes, which as kids, even as teenagers, even at 21, your eyes are not fully developed. So you can see some, and this is a good example for you to think about too. In the mirror, on some people's mirrors, it's still there. Objects appear, closer than they are, or the objects are closer than they appear. I think that's how it's stated. Right. There's a reason why there's a label that's telling you that something is closer than it appears. And so our eyes, our mindset, our mentality, our brains are not even functioning fast enough. That's how people get hit by cars. You always wonder, how could a teenager, how could an adult get hit by a car? Guess what? These are some of the ways that people get hit by cars, because their sight, their vision, and their equilibrium is not fully developed. We just assume that because you're a big life-size adult that you have all the functioning capacity of a life-size adult, and you do not. We continue to grow, and then at a certain age, we start to, those same systems start to slow down, and they eventually slow to a stop. And so we don't want those things to be premature. We want to be able to peacefully thrive. Peacefully thriving means that we're doing it with our healing intact. We're doing it with our mindset intact. We're dealing with it with our judgment intact. We're dealing with it with the wisdom and new information intact. This is a really important workshop to be able to attend. And so this is a 3-part series. So it's the last Friday of July, August, and September. Each workshop is a standalone workshop. But if you want to catch the deal, the 3 workshops is $99 total for all 3. And again, the first one starts this Friday, the 28th of July. Or you can pay $40 for each workshop and pick and choose which ones you want to attend. So specifically for this upcoming session, there's a lot of work around healing inner wounds. That would be understanding and honoring your grief and trauma. That's loss of a pregnancy. That's divorce, identity, whether that's generational grief that we're talking about, or some things that happened in our childhood that we were never able to address. And so those are opportunities to do that. And then to really leave with some new tools, right? New information, because that's the start of change. New information is the start of it. So now come and hear some things that you may not have heard before. Looking for a perspective you may not have seen before. And I know a lot of people say, I've heard a lot of things, and I've done a lot of self-work, and I've read all these books, and I've been all these. Yep, that's very important. But it's also important to hear a new perspective. And both Coach Lakita and I have a very new and fresh perspective on navigating, especially divorces, breakups, and grief. We have such a rich perspective on those things that if you don't have enough tools, or you're still moving in that heaviness of grief, you're still moving in that heaviness, thinking that you can connect with peace from where you are, you may need some additional support. And not only do we do and give you tools in our toolbox during these sessions, but there's also a team of therapists that we work with that you can be referred to. So we know that there's everybody's process and everybody's therapy is not for everyone. But we in particular look to match those people who need that particular resource and a particular package of a therapist. And so we have women and men therapists that we can recommend to you. So come get the resources, take your next step. This is an important chapter, not only in your life, but if you have children, especially girls, who are watching how you handle things, it's going to be very important for them to see you handle it in a way that's successful for you, thereby being successful for them to model. So I wanted to make sure we had that conversation. All right. So I know there's so much to cover. You know, I don't have a problem talking the whole show. But if there is somebody that has some questions, you can always text. You can always, we have a number that you can call in as well. You can call in to the station, and you can also email. I don't want your questions to go unanswered. And if the workshops don't answer that question, both Coach Lakita and I are personal change coaches. And so Lakita has a particular specialty in divorced women, returning to the workplace, returning home. How do you navigate that space? She has a particular certification that allows her to do that, in addition to her own amazing story and experience. So if you're looking for that support, make sure you reach out. Again, you can go to LakitaSimone.com, and let me spell that. It's LaQuitaSimone.com. That is where you go to get your tickets for the workshop coming up on Friday. And that whole series, that is the last Friday of every month for the next 3 months. So that's July, August, and September. You can go to that website, find your ticket, register, pay your fee for that workshop, and join us this Friday. And so for those of you who are looking for that extra support, who have experienced or endured abortion, miscarriage, and stillbirths, this is an opportunity for you as well to reach out to me directly, because the only way that you can register for that class is to reach out to me directly. And so you can reach out to me at 313-759-7855. Again, that's 313-759-7855. So you'll be reaching out to me. That's Heather Heteru. And I know, because this is a very difficult walk for a lot of people. It's a very difficult space to come out of. And because we sometimes go into it and have a certain amount of judgment on some things that happened, that either we had the choice or we didn't have the choice. It was part of the circumstances of life at that time, and those circumstances of life may have changed, but it may have still left you with the grief. It may have still left you with the mindset. It may have still left you with that heaviness. We need for you to be unburdened from that weight. And so finally, let me just say that this self-work is really important, because as women, we anchor our community. One, we are at this point, we are the heads of households. Women, I think it's one of those statistics that's difficult to say, but we are leading in single heads of households. Women are. And so if we have all of the stress and trauma and drama, what are we delivering to our households? Much of what we see right now. There was a time where there were more two-parent households than single-parent households. In those times, there was a lot less violence. There was a lot less stress. It was a lot less trauma and drama. That's the poverty rates was less. All of those things are impacted. So as women, if we want to see change happen, if we want to stop the violence, if we want to raise our economic status, there's some real healing that we have to do, because everything is reflecting on that sticky, gooey life cream that we have. If we're not doing anything to change it, and clearly the more violence we see, the more things that we see in our community, the more poverty we see in our community, that means that we are not doing what we need to do. And so that also means that we're not healing the spaces that we need to heal to pull our community together. We are the anchors. We are the anchors. Mothers raise sons. So when we start talking about what men aren't and what men aren't doing, that's because mothers are raising sons. What are we doing? Where is the starting point? So for each one of us, the starting point has to be with us. When we start to heal, our families start to heal. When our families start to heal, our communities start to heal. There's no way around that. And so obviously we're not healing because it's on an increase, not a decrease. Women are passing away at younger and younger ages from the top three. From the top three. High blood pressure and the things that come with a broken heart. This is real. This is real. And if you're not doing something about it, about your own pain and grief and suffering, it's not going to get any better. You can't wish it away. You have to work through it. And so there are places and spaces to help you do that. So one of those spaces, again, is the workshop coming up on Friday, July 28th. And the way that you can connect, if you have questions even today, you can always reach out to me at 313-759-7855. Again, that's 313-759-7855. You can also reach out to my website, which is yourinspiredjourney.com, yourinspiredjourney.com. And you can also reach out to LaQuitaSimone.com. And again, that's spelled capital LaQuitaSimone.com. And so you can Google us, however you need to find us. Let's connect. Hello, Calvin.
Woo. Man.
Were you running to the studio?
Let me tell you. You know, some days, you know, I like kids. You know. You gotta know. Some days I really like kids, you know. And then there's days that, you know, if we can just get going and give them back. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, but it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. And it's just, okay, I'm burning up. I'm hot. The kids, man.
The kids were having a good time. The kids were okay. The kids were learning and growing. The kids were.
Yep, and then the traffic just exacerbated everything.
Oh yeah, yeah. The traffic typically from like I would say 3:45 till about 6, at least 6:15. It's kind of knotted in spaces and places.
Well, it wasn't. Take these glasses, they fogging up. So it just, once I was able to get off the freeway, I was able to, you know, cut it in half. But the freeway was packed. It was an accident, and that just shut down the traffic to bumper to bumper.
Okay, so you want to tell us about what was occupying you today? That sounds like a good story to tell. A good intermission before I get back on my soapbox.
Right, and which I only got 3 minutes, so you can get back on your soapbox. But so, you know, it was just something Deontay and I, you know, Deontay reached out and wanted to take some kids and expose them to, you know, not just this camp, but the area, you know, for them to, you know, get out of the area, you know, see something different and experience a different type of camp and work, and it was good for them, right? I had a harder time dealing with them trademark people than I'm gonna be on there for some hours. Anyway, that's a whole nother story, but that's it, you know, and they had a good time and they got exposed, and, you know, we were able to talk to a couple of boys that kind of emotional. I just was telling them, and so I'm gonna send some stuff to some of those guys at the league, because the kids are off on Sunday and Mondays. At least 5 of those kids that I had on RV today need to be in the program.
Need to be in a program?
Need to be in our program.
The EMIY program you're speaking to?
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that they're between the ages of either 3 and 24?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. That was a plug for our programs.
Yeah. So, yeah. And we got an event coming up with PBS where we'll be able to recruit some kids out there, too, so...
That's awesome. Even though it's very vague, so I'm just going to fill in some of the gaps. So it was a football camp.
Yes, it was a football camp, and it's a 3-day football camp, but some kids got to go to be exposed.
Okay.
And so that's what we did today.
Okay, so it was a skills camp. It was a character development camp.
Regular football camp. Just
no character. And I'm hearing from the coaches that character in our athletes really needs to be improved.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like character would be a big part of any of the camps these days.
You had your camp, baby. All you got. You had it.
He's saying that it was a higher priority for us than it is for most camps. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you had that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I do want to just share a few tools for those who may not be able to attend the workshop.
Yes, you got 15 minutes. I love it.
Who may not be able to attend the workshop. And this may not be new information for some of you, but it may be new information or timely information for somebody who really needs it. And so I just want to just take a moment and just kind of highlight the stages of grief so that people can find where you are in the process. Personally, for me, when I did not know what stage of grief I was in, it made it very difficult for me because it made it seem like the grief was never going to end. Now, loving somebody and missing their presence, is not necessarily what changes. But understanding and putting some things in perspective. Because when you're in pain, it always feels like that pain is going to always be there. And so because you're experiencing it at that moment, it's so very painful that it's hard to see beyond the pain. You just want it to stop. Whatever kind of pain it is, if it's physical pain, if it was a bee sting, you just want it to stop. You're not thinking about tomorrow and the day after that, whether it's going to be hurting then. It just feels like it's hurting now. And it feels like it's going to continue to hurt forever. And so that's how I felt with my grief. And I'm sure there are other people out there that experience grief that way too. But I want you to know that because grief, there are stages of grief. But knowing where you are, that's just like being on a map. That's why we have GPS, right? So you can always know where you are. You can Google it. You can pull up your maps. I use Waze. You can pull up all of these different tools to find out where you are. So navigating where you are is so important that they put it on our fingertips. So they put it in our cell phones because we typically have that with us. They don't do maps anymore. Physical maps. I personally do, but most people don't do physical maps because they have it at your fingertips. So having this information around the stages of grief at your fingertips is so essential to being able to navigate it. You have to be able to navigate your grief. You have to be able to understand where you are so you know that the next step feels like this, or you can look forward to the next step and then the next step and then the next step until you move yourself through the process. Sometimes it takes longer for some than others, but that sense of being ready and wanting the pain to stop is part of your process. And so I'm pulling this from my book, Cardinal in Red Dress. It's one of the last things that I covered in this particular book. So I use the system that has 10 stages of grief. So I want to share those with you. So the first one is the initial shock. The initial shock about the breakup, the separation, or the passing of that person that means something to you, or that friend, or that icon, this community icon. Recently, for me, it was Reverend Dr. Joanne Watson, and so the initial shock of her passing I'm still kind of in that shock space. But the second step in the stages of grief is an emotional release. So that's when or for me particularly, when I get into my hysterics, when I'm, it feels like you can't stop crying. Like there's an unending well of tears that continue to build up. That's your emotional release. The third one, for some people, the stage is longer for some than others, it's depression. And so that is just a feeling of loneliness or separation, and you feel out of control about doing anything about it. Like you can't control feeling this way. And so the next step as you're moving through that process is the physical symptoms of distress. And this is the one that got me stuck, that I want to make sure other people have enough tools to move through it. That physical symptom for me, it felt like somebody was stepping on my chest all the time. Like just weight on pressure on my chest. That's how it played out for me, the physical symptoms. And so for some people, you might get migraine headaches, you might get nausea or inability to eat. These are physical ways that it shows up, that your grief shows up. The next stage beyond that the next stage is anxiety. So being and feeling very anxious about, okay, how am I going to manage paying the car note? How am I going to manage my bills? How am I going to manage, this is something that we did every year. Maybe it's a family gathering. Maybe it's somebody was close to you in your family. Maybe it was a friend. How am I going to manage, seeing their kids? How am I going to manage those kinds of things? That's the anxiety that often follows this stage of grief. Then the next one, and I think this is where a lot of women are impacted. And when I talked about that gooey life cream in the middle of your life circumstances and where you are now, that this is where a lot of women, a lot of mothers stay and are stuck. And this plays out in relationships. So this plays out when maybe a mother is withholding the kids from the father because they're divorced or they broke up, and her feelings are hurt. And so her feelings are intertwined in those decisions. So it comes out as hostile. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you around the kids. If we have some arrangements, if you're not there at the time, we're leaving. Like, we're not giving you any extra. So it comes out as hostility. That hostility could still be the grief of the breakup or the separation or the divorce. And for some people, it could be from the loss of a loved one. Like, you treat everybody like it's their fault that your loved one is no longer with us, right? And so you get real hostile or irritable or agitated, and you start taking that outward, that emotion, and putting it outward toward people that may have nothing to do with it. But that's the hostility stage that you can find a lot of women in, especially when it comes to breakup and divorces, because we see a lot of our children kind of being pulled and pushed around during that time. But that's the hostility. So that's where a lot of that comes from. The drama and trauma comes from when you're in divorce court or friends of the court and you have to go through this process. And so I want to make sure that people understand that that's a real state of being, but also that it's a real phase of the grief process that you need to move through, because everybody is impacted by the choices and decisions that you make, whether you feel the victim or not. Okay, and so the next stage is guilt. And this is your woulda, shoulda, couldas. I could have called more often. I should have given them their flowers while they were alive. I should have been a better ex, whatever that X factor might be for you. That's where another space where we get stuck, because we're feeling guilty about what we could have done better or what we should not have done. All of those things, the regrets start to surface. The next stage is the 8th stage, by the way, and it is the inability to return to normal. The inability to return to normal. And that's just kind of finding your space. Like, where do I go from here? Or you start trying a lot of different things and nothing seems to work. And you try very hard to be normal. This is also the phase where people, especially women, tend to put on the mask, right? We put on our mask. We go outside like everything is okay. I'm handling everything perfectly. You know, you don't have to worry about me. You don't have to keep calling me. You don't have to keep doing this. We put on our mask because we don't want people to know our struggle. And so that's another place. That's the inability to return to normal. You had a comment?
Yeah, your time.
Oh. So the last two phases, the next state is your healing. And so your healing always starts with an action. It starts with your next step toward being well.
No, seriously. You gotta wrap it. You're done.
I'm done?
You're done.
Okay, so the last stage is acceptance. And the acceptance is being able to establish a new routine, a new process, a new you.
So, again, I came in late. I'm sure you did your thing. And you know, I was grieving in that heat with the bus in that traffic. But no, seriously, Friday, tell everybody where you're going to be Friday. Tell them about that real quick and where they can reach you.
So Friday, we are actually going to be facilitating this workshop at Avalon Healing Center, which is on Bagley downtown. It's an amazing space. It's an amazing place for people to come and heal. So that positive energy is already planted in that space. And Lakita Ferguson is going to be there. I am going to be there. Heather Heteru Miller Man, I'm going to be there. And we are going to help people navigate that term that we used earlier. We want to help people navigate how to peacefully thrive, how to do it in spite of your grief, how to do it in spite of the breakup or the separation or the divorce or even the loss of loved ones, whether that's through birth or whether that's through just the nature of, you know, us living as human beings.
Tune in tomorrow. No. So go ahead and tell them where they can reach you.
You can reach me. I would suggest that you reach out by phone if you can. That's 313-759-7855. Or get your tickets at LakitaSimone.com.
And her website is yourinspiredjourney.com. You can reach me at calvintman.com. It's over. This is the end of the show for this day. I don't know what I need, but I need something, you know.
You do. And I need to thank our amazing engineer, Monique, who's always behind the scenes making us look good and making this session work. So thank you, Monique, as always. We appreciate you.
And don't forget, make sure, tune in next week. And make sure you put your family first. My name is Calvin T. Mann. And encourage me. I'm young. Peace.